And all students in the region, Africa, are converging here at the Federal Capital Territory to critically discuss issues affecting the state of education, the campus insecurity, and other matters in the region. And tonight I'm being joined by Osisi Ogu Sinkenyi, the president of All African Student Union. Just as live here on the program to give us this understanding. Thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me once again.
A lot of concern about the state of Africa. When you look at the many issues, the other time you were here, we were looking at insecurity on the campus, the issues of poor funding and all of that. How would the General Assembly get to address all of these?
Thank you very much. The General Assembly is gathering of African student leaders, the student leaders in their various countries that are active in the advancement of welfare of students and in their countries, and of course by extension on the continent. We come together to discuss, to melange ideas, and also to provide solutions as the critical stakeholders in education development on the continent. We are here to see how we can influence policy by advocacy towards Africa's quest for development and Africa's education system.
All right, very quickly about all of that gathering, and most particular some countries that have been affected due to political instability. How has been the state of these countries, and also what has been the effort in addressing them? We have
over the years released statements, especially whatever it happens. Right now, we will continue to mention countries that have been affected by political instability, and of course as quickly as it impacts education. Today Sudan is in disarray. We are having post-election violence in Mozambique. It has affected campuses. Tigray region of Ethiopia has not been as it was before in the Tigray region because of this insecurity, and there are so many unreported cases along the Chad basin of Africa. So we know that our governments may be doing a little, but it is our time in our own generation to say this is what is acceptable and this is what is not acceptable. And the General Assembly will seek to expose, discuss, and of course advocate for a better education system that we have described as a pro-Africa education system.
I mean, funding has still been an issue, access to education. Those are fields at the crime. If you look at Nigeria, about 18 million out of school children, in schools, also looking at many countries in the region confronted with this. Do you feel Africa is still ready for that conversation before we now come into the issues of curriculum affecting unemployment, state of accepting and funding education, access to education, compulsory education? How can you assess all of these?
Yes, we also want to decry the fact that most governments in Africa has not funded education adequately to reflect the reality of a developing continent. We expect very desperate effort by African governments to fund education. But again, we have seen a situation whereby out of school children population is fueled by the fact that the parents and other caregivers are unable to afford education on the continent. Education, especially at basic level, is a fundamental right, as has been described by the global systems, that education must be availed for every child. So the situation in Africa is that over 100 million children are on record to be out of school due to various reasons, ranging from political crisis to inability to get funded, and in some situations, non-availability of educational infrastructure in their localities. So all this boils down to funding, and that is why we also keep calling on Africa to prioritize education, because wherever you see armed conflict, government tends to invest more in the military than it invests in education and healthcare. So that is why we feel that a peaceful society would guarantee a better educated society, and it will help the government to invest much more in education and also make education a priority. That way they can have more funding given to education than the figures we are seeing that are not encouraging.
Do you share on the belief that if they do not get these children back to school, back to classroom, they are also endangering the nation?
Definitely it is true, because the map of insecurity on the continent also aligns with the map of a lack of education on the continent. There is a nexus between them. So I think that one of the greatest weapons, not only to fight poverty, but to fight insecurity, is of course education. And of course the government must begin to see it in that light and see education as a national investment and an educated citizen as a national asset rather than a social service.
All right. You have made strong case about curriculum in Africa, not just in Nigeria. Decrying the state of the unemployment numbers, rising numbers of unemployment. Do you feel that our curriculum is all helping us in this direction?
Yes, our curriculum has proven not to be, do I say obsolete? The curriculum of Africa has not helped us. And that's why you see a lot about graduate unemployment. Our graduates are not meeting up with the demands of the market. What is Africa's market? Africa's market is the crude oil that we have. Africa's market is the farmlands that we have. Africa's market is the natural resources that we have. Now, if we don't add value to those products that God has given us, how do we keep employment? How then do we industrialize? So we want a curriculum that is able to focus on what Africa needs, not what Canada needs. You see a situation whereby someone is unemployed here in Africa for 10 years, 20 years. Once he goes to Canada or any part of Europe, he gets a job immediately. What it means is that education is given here is meant for him to serve over there. So there is something fundamentally wrong with the curriculum that we have today. I'm not professional enough to say, but of course we believe very strongly there must be a curriculum that can be pro-African, that will seek to solve Africa's problem, and that will seek to advance Africa, and not to leave a massive population of graduates but unemployed in Africa. Whereas our problems are still there, no one to solve them. Our graduates are there creating more problems by being unemployed. How about the Pawan Tapa in the village being given a degree and then he makes good out of what he does? Just like Shakespeare said, if a man is called upon to sweep the streets, let him sweep the streets in such a way that when he dies, an epitaph will be written on his grave that he swept the streets so well. So let us recognize what Africa does and of course award a degree to Africans for what they do for Africa, rather than for us being prepared to continue to serve Europe just like our forefathers did.
Very absolutely. What is the composition of this General Assembly? Because we also look at the fact that it's not just Nigeria-centric. We also have people coming from other parts of the country, the region, for this conference.
Yeah, thank you very much. The Council of All Africa Students Union provides for the Executive Council. We are the elected leaders of the union. And then the next is the Congress, which is the national student leaders from all the countries that there is, all the countries of Africa. Of course, then there's the General Assembly, which provides for all student leaders on the continent without any restriction. Student leaders on the continent at all levels, sub-regional leaders like the West Africa Students Union, East Africa Students Union. We also have national student leaders, like here we have the National Association of Nigerian Students, the Guinean student, Burkina Faso, down there in Mozambique and all of that. Any student leader at all levels, even down to the campus student leadership. That means that the General Assembly is that body that allows us to get the students to come all the way from wherever they are and at all levels to be able to get their voices heard. So what we're going to have tomorrow and next is student leaders at various levels coming into Nigeria and of course coming around at the venue to have conversations, peer review ideas and propose solutions to Africa's problem. And that will give birth to a communique that will be made available to all governments in Africa, especially through their diplomatic missions here in Nigeria and other channels.
When you look at the state of unionism, that those that have described student unionism to be political, whereas there ought to be pressure group, how do you manage this image? Because it looks that it's distractive.
You can agree with me that in every generation cannot be the same. What student unionism was in 1921 when the likes of Kwame Nkrumah, Sheikh Anta Diop and others formed the West Africa Students Union in London, it's not what it is even when a post-independence era. Even post-independence in the 1980s and 1990s, it was not the same. Those days were when you need to come on the streets and of course demonstrate. Now we are in an age where things are a lot different. You don't use the lens of student unionism in the 1980s to judge student unionism in 2024. So people should be contemporary. We are in an age that is quite different from the age of this. We can have the same purpose, the same target, but different approaches. Remember, we have social media to air our view. We have other approaches to air our view. We are also very knowledgeable to sit on the dining table to negotiate, on the dialogue table to negotiate our way out of certain issues. So we mustn't be as antagonistic or as violent as it used to be. But whenever need be, just like we described here in National Association of Nigerian Students, that you consult, you consolidate before you confront. These are the 3 C's. So when you see people taking these steps and you feel that other labor unions don't also go that route, I don't know why people want to describe student unionism not to be as radical as they think it used to be, because our age is a bit different. We are not as this. It doesn't mean that if need be, it doesn't get to that point. But again, our age is a bit different. We are still doing the same thing we are expected to do, but in a much more diplomatic and even more effective way, if you want to ask me.
All right. Looking at, I would love to ask about your expectations. Looking at the stakeholders involved, leaders involved. What are the strong expectations in our assembly?
Yeah, expectations that student leaders have arrived in Nigeria. We are still expecting a couple to arrive tonight and very early hours of tomorrow to join us at the Armed Forces Officers' Mess tomorrow for the opening session of the General Assembly, which is expected to continue on Wednesday the 4th. And then the resolutions will be reached, and of course, communique will be released by the 5th. So our expectations is that we would be able to propose solution to the problems disabling Africa's education system, be it funding, be it campus insecurity, be it lack of prioritization of education, be it that education may not be, may perhaps have not been channeled in such a way to solve Africa's problem. So our advocacy is for a pro-Africa education system. So our expectation is that we will be able to push and give Africa that pro-Africa education system that will solve problem of unemployment and of course help us place value on our continent and solve our own problems ourselves before going to other parts of the world to solve theirs.
Aluta continua.
Victoria Asata.
That was Sisiego Osikeji, the president of All African Students Union, sharing the thought and concern about the upcoming General Assembly of the Student Union in respect to resolving the pressing challenges confronted by the students currently in the region, lack of funding, insecurity, and all of those that were highlighted. We'll bring more issues, deliberate actions and steps and responses from government as well in the state of the Africa in respect to education. Thanks so much for joining us on tonight's Big Talk.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, everyone. We'll now begin to wrap it up here on the show. A lot of concerns and development to the state of the nations. Mr. President departed from France to South Africa to meet President Ramaphosa. A lot of concerns will be coming out from that meeting. We're still keeping track to know what it means. What about the Port Harcourt refinery that commenced operation? How far is it? Has this crashed? Has it affected the prices of the product in the market? Has Nigerian felt relief of having our own local refinery we're yearning for? Is still a major concern. How about the tax reforms? That those that are still having some concerns, it has already scaled to the second reading. It's still looking at is a controversy yet to be resolved. Governors from the north are insisting that there must be a proper consultation, dialogue, so as to resolve all of those interests for the tax reform bills. We'll bring you more details and updates and development in all our programs. Thanks so much for joining us tonight on Big Talk. See you again tomorrow.